The ceremony hall fell silent when the Valorian queen raised her hand, and I realized with dawning horror that she was pointing directly at me. I had expected a medal, maybe a commendation chip, perhaps even a small land grant on one of the frontier colonies. Standard fare for a sergeant who'd stumbled across a lost alien princeling in a war zone and had the basic decency to not let it die. What I had not expected was for her luminescence, matriarch of the 17 spiral systems, to descend from her crystalline throne and walk toward me with something small and trembling cradled in her forearms. "Sergeant Marcus Chen," she intoned, her voice resonating through the hall like wind chimes in a hurricane. "You return to us what we believed lost forever. Our youngest, our hope, ma'am, your luminescence." It was just, I stopped. 30 years of military discipline screamed at me to shut up and accept whatever was coming. In our culture, such a debt cannot be repaid with metal or territory. She stopped before me, and I could see now what she carried. Another Valorian child, perhaps 3 feet tall, with the same bioluminescent skin that shifted between pale blue and soft violet. But where the prince I'd rescued had been all sharp angles and defiant glares, this one seemed diminished somehow. "This is Keth Ari. She will be your companion." The word hung in the air. Around me, I heard the sharp intakes of breath from the diplomatic corps, the confused murmurs from my fellow soldiers. "I'm sorry," I said slowly. "My translator might be malfunctioning." "Did you say companion?" "Your device functions correctly." The Queen's multifaceted eyes studied me with an intensity that made my combat training want to kick in. "Keth Ari is unbonded. In our society, this is a difficult existence. You showed mercy to our kind when you owed us nothing. We offer you what we consider our greatest treasure, connection." The small creature, Keth Ari, lifted her head. Her eyes were huge, taking up nearly a third of her face, and they were the deep purple of a bruise. She looked at me with an expression I recognized immediately. Fear, trying. Not the fear of a child meeting a stranger. The fear of someone who expected to be rejected. Again. "Your luminescence," I began, choosing my words carefully. "I'm honored. Truly. But I'm a combat sergeant. I deploy to active zones. I'm not equipped to care for. She is not a pet, Sergeant Chen." The Queen's voice carried a note of steel, nor is she a burden to be cared for. "Keth Ari is a trained field medic. She has saved 47 Valorian lives in combat conditions. She simply lacks a bond part. Your people might call her an orphan, but the translation is imperfect. She is unanchored, adrift." I looked at the small figure again. A medic. Those delicate hands had held soldiers together while they bled out. Those frightened eyes had seen the same horrors I had. "And if I refuse?" I asked quietly. "Then she returns to the unbonded quarters, and you leave with your medal and our gratitude." The Queen's tone was carefully neutral. "We force nothing. But consider this. You spent 3 days carrying our prince through hostile territory. You shared your water. You sang to him when he could not sleep. You called him buddy and little guy when you thought no one was listening." I felt heat creep up my neck. Those had been long nights in a war zone, just trying to keep a terrified alien kid calm. I hadn't realized anyone had been monitoring. "We know what your heart contains, Sergeant, even if you do not." Keth Ari made a small sound, not quite a word, more like a musical note of resignation, and began to pull away from the Queen's arms. She was going to make this easy for me, I realized. She was going to walk away before I could reject her, saving us both the awkwardness. Something twisted in my chest. "Wait," I said. She froze. "What exactly does this companion thing involve? Day to day?" The Queen's luminescence flickered. Their version of a smile I'd learned. "She accompanies you. Serves as your medical support in the field. Shares your quarters. Over time, if the bond takes root, you will find yourselves attuned. But there is no obligation beyond basic coexistence. Many companion bonds remain formal arrangements. Practical partnerships, nothing more. I thought about my empty bunk, the silence that waited for me after every mission. The way I'd started talking to my weapons during maintenance, just to hear a voice. "Kethari," I said directly to her. "What do you want?" Her eyes widened. Based on what I'd learned of Valorian culture, I suspected that question wasn't asked of unbonded individuals very often. Her voice was softer than the Queen's, less resonant, but it carried a melody that seemed to settle somewhere behind my sternum. "I want to be useful. I want to not be alone anymore. 30 years of building walls around my heart. 3 failed marriages because I couldn't let anyone in. A medal collection that meant nothing because there was no one to show it to. Yeah," I heard myself say. "Yeah, I know that feeling." I extended my hand. In human culture, it was a greeting. I had no idea what it meant to Valorians. Kethari stared at it for a long moment. Then, slowly, she placed her small 4-fingered hand in mine. Her skin was cool and smooth, and I could feel a faint vibration, her bioluminescence pulsing with what I would later learn was cautious hope. "Okay," I said. "Let's figure this out together." The Queen inclined her head, and something shifted in the room, a collective exhale, as if the entire Valorian delegation had been holding their breath. I had no idea what I'd just agreed to. But looking down at the small, scared creature holding my hand like it was a lifeline, I thought maybe, for the first time in years, I'd done something that actually mattered. 3 weeks into our companionship, Kethari still flinched every time I entered the room. She'd taken to sleeping in the corner of my quarters, curled into a ball so tight she looked like a glowing stone. She ate only when I wasn't watching. She spoke only when directly addressed, and even then, her answers were clipped, functional, devoid of the musical quality I'd heard in the throne room. I was failing her, and I had no idea how to fix it. "You're thinking too loud," said Lieutenant Commander Vasquez, not looking up from her coffee. We were in the mess hall, 600, and I'd been staring at the same protein pack for 10 minutes. "That obvious? Chen, you've got a face like a funeral and you've been sighing every 30 seconds. Either you're dying, or it's about your new acquisition." "She's not an acquisition," I said, sharper than I intended. Vasquez raised an eyebrow. "Easy, Sergeant." Poor choice of words. "How's she settling in?" "She isn't." I pushed the protein pack away. "She acts like she's waiting for me to hurt her. Or abandon her. Or both. The Valorian files say unbonded individuals have usually been rejected multiple times. Failed matchings. Sometimes abuse." Vasquez's tone was clinical, but her eyes were sympathetic. "Takes a while to convince someone like that you're not going to be another disappointment. How long is a while? However long it takes." I wanted to throw something. "That's not helpful. Chen, you spent 30 years learning how to kill things. Nobody taught you how to heal them." She stood, collecting her tray. "Maybe stop trying to fix her. Just be there. Let her figure out you're safe." I mulled that over for the rest of the day. That evening I didn't try to engage Kethari in conversation. I didn't ask if she needed anything. I just sat at my desk, cleaning my sidearm, and let the silence exist. After an hour, I heard movement. She'd emerged from her corner, watching me with those enormous purple eyes. I kept my attention on the weapon in my hands, breaking it down, wiping each component, reassembling with practiced ease. "That is a Harken 7, she said quietly. I nearly dropped the barrel. It was the first voluntary statement she'd made in days. "Yeah," I managed. "Standard issue. The recoil compensator on that model tends to fail after extended use. I have seen it cause hand injuries." A pause. "I could modify it for you, if you wished." I looked at her then. She was standing at the edge of the desk, her body language caught between approach and retreat. You know weapons? I am a combat medic. I must understand what causes the wounds I treat. Her bioluminescence flickered. Embarrassment, maybe. Also, I find machinery interesting. It is predictable. It does not change its mind. I set the pistol down. Unlike people. Unlike people. I gestured to the empty chair across from me. Show me what you'd change. She hesitated. Then, slowly, she moved closer. Her hands, so small, so precise, picked up the components I'd laid out. Within minutes, she was explaining stress points and wear patterns, her voice growing stronger as she forgot to be afraid. I understood maybe a third of the technical details, but I listened like my life depended on it. When she finished, she looked up and seemed startled to find me watching her with what I hoped was encouragement rather than intensity. You are not bored, she said, almost accusatory. Should I be? Most humans find technical discussion tedious. They prefer, I do not know, sports, entertainment media, things I do not understand. I've never been most humans. I picked up the modified pistol, testing the weight. This is good work, Kethari. Really good. Her luminescence shifted to a soft gold. Pleasure, I was learning. You are welcome. That night, she didn't sleep in the corner. She curled up at the foot of my bed instead. Still distant, but closer. Progress. Our first real test came 2 weeks later. A border skirmish had escalated on Theta 7, and my unit was deployed for extraction. Civilian scientists trapped in a research station, hostile forces closing in. Standard smash and grab, except nothing in war is ever standard. I'd argued against bringing Kethari. She wasn't military personnel, wasn't trained for human combat operations, I am going. It was the most forceful I'd ever heard her. It's dangerous, I said. I am a combat medic. Danger is my function. She met my eyes, and for the first time I saw steel beneath the fear. Also, you have a 23% higher survival rate with field medical support. I calculated it. You calculated my survival rate? I have calculated many things about you, Marcus Chen. She used my first name deliberately. I could tell. I know you will not ask me to stay behind because you think you are protecting me, but you would be wrong. I stared at her. This was not the trembling creature from the throne room. This was someone who had made a decision and would not be moved. If something happens to you, I started, then it will be my choice, my consequence. Her voice softened. I am tired of others deciding what risks I may take. Please, let me serve my function. In the end, I couldn't argue with that. I knew too well what it felt like to be sidelined for your own good. The mission went sideways in hour 3. We'd extracted the scientists and were moving to the evac point when an ambush tore through our forward team. I took shrapnel to the thigh and went down hard, blood pooling beneath me faster than I could apply pressure. Sergeant Chen is down, someone shouted. And then, she was there. Kethari moved through the chaos like she was made for it, her small form weaving between cover positions while plasma fire scorched the air around her. She reached me in seconds, her medical kit already open. Stupid, she muttered, her hands working with impossible speed. Stupid, reckless human. What are you made of, tissue paper? Hey, I gasped. I'm the one bleeding here. Yes, because you stepped in front of Private Morrison instead of letting him take his own cover. She pressed something against my wound that burned like fire and ice simultaneously. I saw it. Heroic and idiotic in equal measure. That's basically my biography. She made a sound that might have been a laugh. Hold still. I am sealing the artery. Around us, the firefight continued. I could hear my unit returning fire, holding the line. but all I could focus on was the small alien crouched over me, her luminescence pulsing with concentration, her hands steady despite everything. "Got it," she said finally. "You will limp for a week, but you will walk." "Thanks," I managed. She looked at me, and something in her expression cracked. "Do not thank me. Just do not die. It would be inconvenient." Later, on the transport back to base, I woke to find her sitting beside my stretcher. She wasn't touching me, still too new for that, but she was close. Closer than she'd ever voluntarily been. "You stayed," I said. My voice was rough with medication. "You are my companion," she replied, as if that explained everything. Where else would I be? I reached out and touched her hand. She didn't flinch. The Karani War had been grinding on for 8 years when they hit Outpost Sentinel. I'd been stationed there for 6 months, Cathari at my side. In that time, we developed a rhythm. She handled medical. I handled tactical. And somewhere in between, we'd learned to read each other's silences. She knew when I needed space after a bad mission. I knew when her luminescence dimming meant she was remembering things she'd rather forget. We didn't talk about it. We didn't have to. But when the Karani fleet dropped out of hyperspace and started bombarding the outpost, all our careful understanding went out the window. "Lower levels are compromised," Captain Okonkwo reported, her voice crackling through the comm. "We've got 47 personnel trapped in Medical Bay 3. Chen, your squad is closest. On it." I was already moving, checking my rifle. "Cathari, I am coming. This isn't a skirmish. This is a full assault." "I am aware." She fell into step beside me, her medical kit secured across her back. Medical Bay 3 holds patients. My patients. I will not leave them. 4 months ago I might have argued. Now, I just nodded. We fought our way down 3 levels, through corridors choked with smoke and debris. The Karani had breached the outer hull, and their ground forces were pouring in. Tall insectoid creatures with chitin armor and plasma scythes that cut through steel like butter. I had killed a lot of things in my career. Karani were some of the worst. They didn't negotiate. They didn't take prisoners. They consumed. Contact left. Private Yun shouted, and the corridor erupted fire. We lost 2 soldiers in the first exchange. I took a glancing hit to the shoulder that Keth Ari sealed on the move, her hands never trembling even as plasma bolts scorched the wall inches from her head. By the time we reached Medical Bay 3, we were down to 4 combat-ready personnel. The bay was a nightmare. Wounded soldiers on every surface, medical staff working frantically, and outside the reinforced doors, the sound of Karani cutters working through the metal. "They'll breach in 10 minutes, the head medic reported. "Maybe less." I looked at the wounded. 33 people, who couldn't walk, couldn't fight, couldn't run. "Then we hold for 10 minutes, I said. Cathari touched my arm. "Marcus." I turned to her, and the look on her face made my stomach drop. "The East Corridor," she said quietly, so the others couldn't hear. "I saw it on the way here. It has partial structural damage, but it connects to the emergency shuttle bay. If someone could lead the mobile wounded through, draw the Karani attention, that's a suicide run. For one person, yes. But if someone stayed behind to hold the main door while the evacuation proceeded," she stopped. "The mathematics are unfavorable either way. But 1 loss is better than 33. I understood what she wasn't saying. "No, Marcus," I said. "No." I grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at me. "You are not sacrificing yourself. Not today. Not ever. You cannot make that decision for me. Watch me." Her luminescence flared. Anger, frustration, something deeper. "This is what I am for. This is my function. To preserve life, even at the cost of your function?" The word came out harsh. "Is that what you think you are? A function? She went still, Kethari. I softened my grip, but didn't let go. When I agreed to this companion thing, I didn't sign up for a tool. I signed up for a partner, someone who matters, someone I couldn't finish the sentence. 3 decades of emotional walls don't come down in 6 months. But she heard what I didn't say. I matter to you, she whispered. Not a question. Yeah. My voice was rough. Yeah, you do. So we're going to find another way. Together. The doors shuddered. We had maybe 5 minutes. Together, she repeated. And something shifted in her eyes. Then let us be clever, Marcus Chen. You are good at tactics. I am good at medicine. What happens when we combine? I looked at the medical bay, at the equipment, at the wounded, and an idea started to form. The anesthetic gas, I said slowly. How much do you have? Enough to sedate this entire bay for surgery. Why? Because Karani breathe. And I'm betting their filters aren't designed for Valorian medical compounds. Her luminescence shifted to bright gold. That is... creative. Can you modify the concentration? Make it stronger? I can make it lethal. She paused. To Karani, humans and Valorians will merely sleep. Then let's put them to sleep. We worked fast. Kethari modified the gas while I rigged a delivery system using the ventilation ducts. When the Karani finally cut through the doors, they were met with a cloud of purple vapor that dropped them in seconds. We lost 3 more soldiers holding the line while the gas worked. We saved 30. In the aftermath, sitting in the evac shuttle while Outpost Sentinel burned behind us, Kethari leaned against my uninjured shoulder. It was the most physical contact she'd ever initiated. You were right, she said quietly. About what? I am not a function. Her voice was thoughtful. I spent so long believing my worth was measured in lives saved, wounds healed. I thought if I could be useful enough, someone would want me, keep me. And now I think perhaps being wanted is not about usefulness at all. She looked up at me. You did not keep me because I could heal your wounds, Marcus. You kept me because you chose to. Every day you chose to. Every day, I agreed. Why? It was the question I'd been avoiding for months. The one I didn't have words for. But sitting in that shuttle, covered in blood and ash and the weight of everything we'd survived, the walls didn't seem so important anymore. Because when I'm with you, I said slowly, I remember what it feels like to not be alone. And I spent 30 years forgetting. Her hand found mine, small and cool and vibrating with soft golden light. I will not let you forget again, she said. I believed her. The Karani War ended on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were when Kethari insisted on reorganizing my gear, claiming my human chaos was inefficient. I'd learned to love those Tuesdays. The quiet domesticity of watching her sort ammunition by caliber while humming Valorian lullabies under her breath. When the ceasefire announcement came through, I was sitting on my bunk, letting her lecture me about proper equipment maintenance. And this knife has not been sharpened in at least 2 standard weeks, which is unacceptable given the potential for... Marcus, you have stopped listening. War's over, I said. She went still. What? The Karani just surrendered. Unconditional. It's over. For a long moment, neither of us moved. 8 years. Thousands of battles. Millions of lives lost on both sides. And it ended with a calm announcement, while Kethari held my tactical knife. Oh, she said finally. Yeah. What happens now? It was the question I'd been dreading. Because in wartime, our arrangement made sense. A soldier and his medic. Combat partners. But peacetime was different. Peacetime meant choices. I'm being offered a discharge, I said. 30 years of service, full pension. They're actually kind of insisting. And you will accept? I don't know. I looked at her. Depends on a few things. She set the knife down carefully. What things? What you want? I took a breath. Keth Ari, when this started you didn't have a choice. The Queen assigned you to me. You were unbonded and desperate and I was just available. But things are different now. You have options. You could go back to Valorian space, find a proper match among your own people. You could, Marcus, stay in military service. There are plenty of units who would want someone with your skills, Marcus. Or just take some time, figure out what you actually want, without someone else deciding for Marcus Chen. Stop talking. I stopped. She moved closer until she was standing directly in front of me. Her luminescence was doing something I'd never seen, shifting through colors too fast to track, like emotions she couldn't contain. Do you remember what you said on the shuttle, after Sentinel? I remember. You said being with me helped you remember what it felt like to not be alone. She reached up and placed her hand on my chest, over my heart. For 8 years, I have watched you, learned you. You are stubborn and reckless, and you make terrible jokes when you are scared. You cannot cook. You talk in your sleep, mostly tactical assessments, which is strange but endearing. You pretend to be hard, but you carried a lost child through a war zone because you could not bear to leave him. You let a broken Valorian into your life because something in you recognized something in her. Keth Ari, in my culture, the companion bond is sacred. It is not assignment or convenience. It is choice, renewed every day, until the choosing becomes as natural as breathing. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I have been choosing you every day for 8 years. If you think I would stop now, when we finally have peace, what do you want? I asked, echoing her question from the throne room all those years ago. I want to not be alone anymore. She smiled, actually smiled, her luminescence blooming into warm gold. I want to be with the stubborn, reckless human who taught me that I am more than my function. I want to grow old with someone who sees me. If that someone would have me. I pulled her close. It was the first time I'd held her properly, not in crisis, not in fear, just holding her because I wanted to. She fit against me perfectly. Yeah, I said into her hair. Yeah, I'll have you. The discharge papers came through the next week. I signed them without hesitation. We found a small place on a colony world, somewhere green and quiet, far from battlefields. Keth Ari set up a medical practice. It turned out there was massive demand for a medic who could treat both human and Valorian patients. I did security consulting, mostly to keep busy, but the mornings were the best part. I'd wake to find her already up, humming those Valorian lullabies while she made breakfast. Her luminescence would shift to soft gold when she saw me, every single time, like the sight of me was a gift she hadn't expected. One morning, about a year after the war ended, I asked her something that had been bothering me. That day in the throne room, when the Queen gave you to me, I paused. You looked terrified. But you took my hand anyway. Why? She considered the question while stirring something that smelled like cinnamon. Because you asked what I wanted, she said finally. No one had ever asked me that before. In that moment I thought, perhaps this human sees me as a person. Perhaps this one might be different. And was I? She turned to look at me, and her eyes held 8 years of battles and blood and slow, careful healing. You were everything. I'd spent 30 years building walls, learning to survive alone, convincing myself that connection was weakness, that caring was a liability. It took one small, scared alien to show me how wrong I was. The Queen had called Keth Ari her greatest treasure, a companion, a bond, a connection. At the time, I thought she was speaking in metaphors. She wasn't. Keth Ari was exactly what she'd promised. And in return, she'd gotten something too. A home. A purpose. Someone who chose her every single day until the choosing became as natural as breathing. The Queen's reward had left me speechless. Not because of what she'd given me, because of what I'd almost refused. The end.
In Frankreich gibt es
Ich sehe
angeblich...
alleine jetzt hier schon 4 und habe mich nicht mehr gesucht danach.
Vielleicht gibt es ja mittlerweile auch mehr.
Dafür gibt es hier voll wenig Kreisverkehre.
Ja.
Die gibt's ja
Südlich?
bei uns wie Sand
Hier,
am
da
Meer.
siehst du Aberdeen. Aberdeen, klar. Ja, südlich. Die sind aber hier in diesem Mark Twain Forest da irgendwie voll drin.
Also sprich orografisch wahrscheinlich auch ein bisschen getriggert, kann ich mir vorstellen.
Ja.
Ja, und bei Tornados sollte man wie viel Abstand halten? So, Frage an die Fachkriege vorne.
Jetzt geht's los, ja.
Also Tornado Abstand halten kommt immer ein bisschen drauf an. Ne? Also ein bisschen Sicherheitsabstand muss man sowieso immer halten. Allein schon deshalb, weil natürlich auch Tornados gerne ein bisschen Eigendynamik entwickeln. Es gibt ja Tornados, die ziehen tatsächlich auch wieder zurück. Es gibt Tornados, die schlingern ein bisschen, ja, also diese Luftzirkulation. Also ein bisschen muss man auf jeden Fall schon deshalb Abstand halten, selbst wenn man praktisch in der vermeintlich sicheren Zone steht. Und dann kommt es ein bisschen auch auf die Stärke und Optik des Tornados an. Ist ja klar, wenn da jetzt ein EF5 vor dir ist und da fliegen irgendwelche Autos durch die Gegend, ja, und dann hast du auch noch den Debris-Fall. Also, weiß ich nicht, da würde ich jetzt nicht so gerne, ich sag mal, näher als 2 Kilometer dran stehen.
Nee, auf keinen Fall.
Das sage ich schon ganz ehrlich. Selbst da bist du wahrscheinlich in Gefahr, dass